So today we're going to be doing some encapsulated tortoiseshell. I'll include a picture here so you can see the inspiration from Who Nailed It, or We Nailed It, I think. But basically, she is one of the most incredible nail artists on Instagram, and I had to have a go at these. These obviously are very different because my client wanted a relatively short coffin, but I did use a similar technique to her. So I've started off with my usual prep routine. I'm just applying some talc-free talcum powder there. There's a lot of discourse I keep seeing in my comments about talc, and whether I think in some countries it may still be an active ingredient, but certainly in the UK I don't think it is. I don't think we can use kind of the talc that may be considered dangerous. I'm afraid I'm not up on it enough. So what I've done is I've got a talc-free talc, which I got from Amazon. If you go into my link tree, there is a links for kind of all of the products. And if there's anything specific that you're interested in, let me know below. I'm using the Honer etching tool here without an etching pad on it, and I'm basically just lifting the cuticles up. I want to create a slight pocket so my e-file flame bit can kind of go in and lift that up just a little bit more. Her cuticles were a little bit on the sticky side. They're not normally this sticky, so I don't know what was going on, but we have lifted them up, and certainly using the little bit of talc has absolutely helped dry them out and helps them come off a little bit quicker. And while I have you, if you could like and share this post, I'd be super grateful, as it gets it out there a little bit more, and it gets me a little bit closer to the goal of potentially doing this full time eventually. So yeah, that would be great, and give me a like and a follow and subscribe and all that good stuff. So I am doing my usual prep routine here. The e-file's on a relatively high speed on the flame bit, probably around about 14 to 16, it depends on the bit I'm using, the machine, etc. But normally around about 14 to 16, and I'm not applying any pressure. I'm literally just going over the surface, and the joy about the talc is it really helps that surface clean up very, very well. So it basically kind of means that my e-file bit doesn't clog, it goes smooth over the surface, it dries up all of any oils that are on the surface, so highly recommend it. But you want to make sure as well that your e-file is at a really nice angle. So the angle needs to be almost parallel. It's so difficult to show it here, but you don't want the tip pointing into the nail, and you certainly don't want the belly either kind of burying into the nail. You want it to be as flat to the nail as possible, because we want to go over the surface and not dig into the nail. So I'm going in forward down the left hand side of the nail, and then in reverse down the right hand side of the nail. Gosh, it's hard to think when you do things so automatically, isn't it? But yes, so basically I'm just lifting any cuticle. I want to get as much space as I can. This is one of my closest friends, and I do her nails a lot, so I very rarely have much to do or to trim on her cuticles at all, because I do them quite regularly. There's just not a lot there, so it's definitely beneficial if you are getting your nails done more often. It makes life so much easier. Next, I will bring out my Katie Barnes scissors. They are the best scissors. I wouldn't use anything else now. They are so small, so delicate, so sharp, and they just like, I mean, I know it's hard to see there, but there's very little cuticle to nip off, and it just kind of it kind of gets any little bits that are loose and obviously exfoliated and non-living. And then sometimes I'll go back in with my e-file bit just to make sure it's totally clear. So next step is our sanding band. So I am using the mini sanding band and the mini mandrel from Katie Barnes. You can get these in different versions, slim ones. This one's perfect, I think, and it seems to suit everybody's nails. But basically what you want to do is you want to just etch that nail plate. I'm on literally speed 2. You don't want to be on like anything more than 2, maybe 4 max, but I try and get it as low as the e-file will let me. We want to etch the nail plate, we don't want to buff it away. So I'm literally just tickling over the top of it. I'm making contact, but I'm not digging into the nail or anything like that. I'm working on a low speed. It's just as if I was hand filing, it's just a bit quicker, that's all. Once I've done all that, I will cleanse and dehydrate, and then I go in with 2 coats of the Young Nails Protein Bond. So then I've applied my tips. Now I didn't keep this in because I didn't record it. Apparently I was having one of those days. So apologies about that. But basically I've applied and shaped my tips, and then I'm going in with a clear base layer. The likelihood is what we tend to do on this particular client is maybe redesign once or twice or infill depending on what we've done previously. And then I'll do a soak off and a fresh set. We just find that works really well for her nails, and it means that I can actually kind of see the health, just because it might not be always consistent as when I can get to her because she's not quite round the corner. So I'm using the Tortoiseshell detail paint from Hona. Basically what you want to do is you want to paint a relatively thin layer onto the nail, and then into it I'll go in with some black. Now I'm doing a few different techniques here. So I've got one of them's a full cover, one of them's ombre, we've got some French, that kind of thing. I left the French until afterwards, so I've done the majority of them first, and then I go in and do my French. But part of the reason of that for that is because I don't want to be doing filing on it and getting my filing bits onto the other layers and then encapsulating kind of bits of filed acrylic into it. So that's why I tend to do the French separately. Ideally, I would have done them first, but that's a different matter. So yes, what I'm doing is I am going in with a thin layer of the Torty gel paint, and then once I've done that, I just get the black gel paint again from Honer, and I am going in with some little black splodges. You'll see there I'm trying to feather that a little bit, but in all honesty the acrylic I'm using is quite opaque, so it really covers that join area when I do my ombre in a bit. Remember, with tortoiseshell, it's a natural occurring material. I couldn't think of the word there, I do apologise, but it's a natural occurring material. So there's just no right or wrong way to do it, in all honesty. So this is 3 layers. You'll see how I do it fully, obviously, in a moment. But basically I kind of layer it up because you can see the layers in proper tortoiseshell, and there's some gold flakes in it too as well. So don't worry about being precise, certainly not at this level. At this level we're just getting some splodges on there, into the uncured first layer, and then we'll give that a cure. The reason I use an uncured, gosh, that's a difficult word to say, isn't it? So the reason I use an uncured first layer is because it means that the black almost separates a bit. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like a blooming gel, but it's a similar kind of effect. Now, I cannot stress how important it is you cure these fully between layers. We're not doing anything on uncured gel. You never leave uncured gel on the skin. Even if it's in the middle of acrylic, it doesn't matter, because that can still seep through the acrylic and cause contact dermatitis. So I'm going in with a second layer of the Torty gel paint, just again to make it darker. The lovely thing about this is you can build it up to build the look up. You could leave it at this and it would be kind of like a more ambery colour, but I decided to go in with a third layer in a moment because that really gives it a lovely kind of rich, almost chocolatey colour. It's absolutely stunning. And then again, going in with different splodges. It's in slightly different places this time. So I'll try and not necessarily fill in all of the gaps because you want some of it to be see-through, but just try and make sure you are kind of overlapping it on some of the black, going on some of the bits that you haven't touched previously. And you'll see again in a moment how I'm doing that, but just basically smoosh it in there. I do go in with the black on all of the nails, by the way, for the second time. I didn't keep it all in there just because it disappeared off camera, and as gorgeous as her hands are, I didn't think you'd want to see just knuckles for a couple of minutes. So I thought it was better just to kind of trim that out and crack on so you can actually see the full process. And now we have our final layer, which is just the plain tortoiseshell. Can you see how much richer that is now? It's so nice. And then in a moment, I will come back and I'll tell you about the encapsulation in acrylic. It was at this point I decided to do the French while I still had all of the acrylic out, obviously. So I go and do my smile line first. I like to blend the back of that bead back and create the smile line at the front of the nail, I suppose, towards the free edge, almost where your natural smile line would be, but just extend it a little bit because I do like a deeper smile line. But basically, you are just using the side of your brush to create like a ledge, I suppose you could say, for your brush and your file to butt up against. Don't worry how it looks at the minute because we will be going in with a second bead, as I am there, just of the acrylic, basically for the cuticle. So I'm placing that by the cuticle and then I am just blending that forward towards the free edge. I think people find French super intimidating, and I agree it is pretty scary to do it this way. And in all honesty, I haven't been doing it a lot at all because most of my clients are just wanting the gel paint painted on the top, which is just as valid, by the way. I do love this technique because I adore how it looks and it's also really hard wearing. But as I mentioned previously, I did feel a little bit out of practice with it. So I have decided that wherever possible, I'm going to try and get into my sets and into my clients' sets. And they are all very understanding and very sweet, and I appreciate them very much. So it just means that I can get back on top of it because I just love the technique. I adore it. And it's a similar technique if you're doing this in acrylic or in gel. It really doesn't matter. Obviously, this would be hard gel. I wouldn't do this in biab. It's just not you don't want it to be getting too thick and having to cure it. Biab really should just be a cover layer to strengthen the natural nails. So I wanted the gold flakes to stand out a little bit, whereas I think in the original set that the inspo I went from, I think that might have been encapsulated in more tortoiseshell paint. So I decided, just so it was a bit sparkly, and I had these really beautiful holographic flakes to go in on the top. So I'm going in with just a tiny little bit of acrylic on the end of my brush. If you want to pick up a smaller bead of a clear acrylic, all you need to do is make sure your brush is much more angled. So the angle of your brush is much higher going into that acrylic pot, and then just literally dab it on the top of the acrylic powder. Don't push into it or anything like that, and you should pick up quite a small bead. But you'll see here in a minute how I do that. So I'm just, see how high that brush is. I know it's probably a bit odd to see it, but I'm literally just going in and then I'm just kind of pushing that around the nail where I want it, really. And you can do that one of two ways. You can either paint a little bit of the clear acrylic onto the nail and then go back into your glitter and press the glitter into the acrylic, or you can use a tiny little bit of the acrylic and then you can pick up the glitter with the acrylic. These flakes love to stick together, so sometimes I find if I just paint a little bit onto the nail first and then go in with the acrylic with only just a slightly damp brush, it kind of goes on a little bit easier. But as you can see here, I kind of do it both ways. So really, again, as I always say, it's whatever works for you, as long as your structure's right, as long as you are caring for the health of your client's nails, etc., etc. That is all that matters. So I'm doing an ombre on the pinky finger there. So I'm literally just applying a bead of nude at the cuticle. On a small nail like this, I just went straight at the cuticle because actually you don't have a lot of blending down to do, really. So just blend it down over that joint, and actually, again, because it's quite an opaque powder, it blended really well. What I'll sometimes do with a bigger one is I'll put the first bead over the actual blend area. I think I do that on the thumb in a moment, and it just means that it's kind of, it covers it so there's no harsh line. So again, if you need to add in tiny little beads here and there, that's absolutely fine. Sometimes I find with these you have to. It was a warmer day, so my acrylic was setting reasonably quickly, so there was just a few times I had to add on just a tiny little bit just to make the blend a little bit smoother. Also, I am doing this before I do the French because, as I think I mentioned before, I don't want to file and get all my filings into my encapsulation. So if I'd filed these smile lines on the French, if I'd filed them before I'd done my encapsulation, it's very possible that I'd have little kind of chunks of nude and dust encapsulated into the other nails, which just isn't a vibe. So I decided not to do that. I am covering that join area with some clear. I do go over it from the cuticle down, but I just wanted to start getting my structure in and make sure that tip was nice and strong. It doesn't need to be thick at the tip, it just needs to have some coverage. So again, the nails are quite small, so I'm having to pick up relatively small beads. So angle is everything. Make sure that angle of that acrylic brush is, I think, if you imagine it pointing straight down, I think that's a 90-degree angle. angle. I will do some maths before I do my next video and get one of my slide rules or whatever you call it out. But yes, so once I've done all of that, I'll move on to the next nail, and I think it's the pointer that I do next, and that is literally just a full encapsulation. If you were wondering what the grumbling was in that last video, it was one of my neighbours has one of those incredibly noisy cars. I don't know what it's called, but it just makes a lot of noise when it leaves. It's only briefly, but sometimes if I'm recording a voiceover, you can catch it. So this is like for encapsulating the full nail, and I'm literally just placing that bead by the cuticle, and I think I do this in one bead. I might add a little bit on here and there, but because I don't always do one bead, in fact I rarely do one bead method, to be honest with you, I literally just pull that down the nail. But because I had a bit of structure already with the clear and then the gel polish, I'm literally just kind of pulling that down over the top. So once I've encapsulated everything, I do file in that smile line. Now, I don't know whether I caught it because I can't seem to find the footage. But basically, you just want to file round the smile line so you get your shape. I have done it on other videos, and I may do it on the other hand in a moment. So hopefully you'll see that. But if not, you're just basically filing it so it's really smooth and crisp. And then I'll give it a really, really good cleanse, and I'm going in for the same method for the other nails. So one layer of the tortoiseshell with some black splodges in it, cure that, another layer of the tortoiseshell with maybe a little bit more black, cure that, another layer of the tortoiseshell, and then some gold leaf. So once we've gone in with all of our gold leaf, just exactly the same process as on the other nails, we're going to encapsulate that again in clear. Don't worry about going over that smile line with any of the gel, with any of the gold leaf, with any of the acrylic. We're going to file it in a moment. Obviously with the acrylic I try not to add too much, but the gel don't worry too much about because it'll file off. And in fact, I think when I filed I might have even used a smooth top safety bit in like fine or medium, so it wasn't even a particularly strong grit. So I'm making sure those sides are really well encapsulated. Again, I'm trying not to add too much bulk, but I just want to make sure there's a good layer of acrylic over them, so when I file, I don't file away all of that lovely colour. So now time for the super satisfying part. I'm going in firstly with a fine safety top bit from, I think this one was from Novelli Nails on TikTok shop. I've got one from Katie Barnes as well. That's why I'm kind of a bit reticent to say exactly, but it's one of them and they're both fantastic. But I'm just smoothing off the end of that as well. So when I come in with my hand file in a moment, that makes life easier. But you see what I was saying here about that gel polish coming straight off? It comes off so easily. Also, try and file as much as possible from right to left over the top of the nail rather than down the length. It just stops you digging out too much. I'm using a light feathering touch here just to try and get some of that bulk off, but make sure you don't dig into it because otherwise you'll end up with dips in your nails, whereas if you're going right to left it's going to be much smoother. Also, I've taken my gloves at this point because I'm no longer working with any wet products really apart from my top coat in a moment, and my hands were incredibly hot and I was incredibly uncomfortable. And unfortunately, I am getting better at wearing my nails all the way throughout my gloves all the way throughout the service, but I just couldn't quite cope this time. So then I go in with my hand file to really crisp up the shape. So I do the free edge first, so normally the left then the right, and then I will do the tip as well, just like that. And then I go down the right hand side of the nail, starting at the cuticle, and then I go down the left hand of the nail again, starting at the cuticle. That just finds that just really smooths off that cuticle area, and now I'm beveling over the top of it. You want to make sure that nail is completely matte and you've buffed off and it's completely covered in file marks, if that makes sense. If there's any patches that look like they haven't been filed, you've probably got a dip in the nail. So have a real look at it and just make sure the whole nail is totally smooth. You can run your finger over it as well, or your thumb, and that really, really helps. But I like to just make sure that it's completely, not smooth, but it's completely filed. You will see the difference. The section that isn't filed will look slightly darker. And then I go in with my handy dandy buffer to make it sure it's nice and smooth, not too smooth because you want your gel polish top coat to stick, but smooth enough so it doesn't have any scratches. Next, for what I feel is the most important part, is you want to turn the client's hand round. This is the best way I can show it. I am trying to work out a better way of showing this, and I am literally just filing up the sides of the nails because you get a really good view from this angle of what it looks like for your client. I'm trying to keep that file as straight as possible because I want my side walls to be as crisp as possible. And then finally go over the top on a 90-degree angle. This will ensure such a crisp shape. Finally, we go in with some top coat. This one is from 20 Pro and it's my current favourite top coat. It reminds me a little bit of the gel bottle one that I used to buy. You know, the Extreme Shine top coat from them. It's really, really similar. It's a similar consistency and it's hemi-free as well, this one. So I love working with it because it doesn't really add any bulk to the nail, but it's enough so it does fill any teeny tiny scratches if there are any. And also it's super shiny and the shine really lasts. And in a moment, we'll have the final look. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day, and please do make sure to like and follow for more.